Liberians anxiously await the outcome of Tuesday's presidential election. We'll have a live update from Monrovia. Europe claims success in tackling the migrant crisis, but Amnesty International accuses the bloc of complicity in abuse. And South Africa's approach to helping penguins in peril. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. Liberians are anxiously awaiting the results of the presidential runoff election. Vote counters in the West African country are tabulating ballot cast for either Vice President Joseph Boakai or former soccer star George Weah, who predicted a win after voting on Tuesday.
I know that I'm going to win. I'm not associated with losing. So this victory is certain, and I'm going to win.
Weah says his victory is assured because the popular vote is behind his coalition. However, critics of Weah, 51, say he has almost no real political or governing experience, and opponents of Boakai, 73, have accused him of doing little as Ellen Johnson Sirleaf's vice president. International observers, including former Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan, are at the polling stations to monitor vote counting, which largely appeared to have come off without a major snag.
So one person must win. That person is a Liberian. The person who will lose is also a Liberian. So the issue is not winning or losing. If you win, you celebrate. And you celebrate maturely because you're going to be the president of everybody. If you lose, you also accept gallantly.
Well, pollsters say Tuesday's election is too close to call, and official final results aren't expected for a few days. Either Boakai or Weah will succeed President Sirleaf, who is stepping down after serving 12 years as Africa's first elected female leader. If all goes smoothly, Liberia will see its first peaceful and democratic transfer of power in more than 70 years. Now, for the latest on the presidential runoff election, James Buddy, managing editor of VOS Daybreak Africa, joins me by phone from Monrovia. Good evening, James.
Good evening, Vincent, and good evening to your listeners.
Thank you. Now, have election authorities there announced any provisional results up to this point?
Vincent, we were told this morning, first of all, right now, vote tally is going on at the National Elections Commission under the watchful eye of representatives of the two parties that went into the runoff. That's the Coalition for Democratic Change of George Weah and the ruling Unity Party of Vice President Joseph Boakai. The general public is also invited to watch the tallying process. We are told by the National Elections Commission's officials that sometime during today that the commission is going to give some kind of its first official preliminary result.
Now, there are international observers. We've seen sometimes controversy over their pronouncements in other countries like Kenya. What are they saying, and what is the reaction?
I think you're right. They're being very guided. They're being very guided. Right now, as we speak, I'm outside the conference hall of a joint news conference by the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, which are the observer missions led by the former Ghanaian President, Mr. Mahamat, and the African Union Commission, which observer missions led by Mr. Erastus Mwecha, the former Deputy Chair of the African Union Commission. They are holding a news conference right now based on observations that they have gathered from their different representatives in the different polling places in Liberia's 15 counties. As I mentioned, they are being guided. They want to make sure that whatever they say is going to be in line with what the Elections Commission is going to say, so as to avoid adding on to already a polarizing political climate here.
Now, James, voter turnout was said to be very low. How could this impact the final tally?
I think it's true, Vincent, the voter turnout was very low. And depending on who you talk to, some people say if the turnout was low, then it could favor the Vice President, Joseph Boakai, because probably he has voters who are more politically determined or mature to go to the polls, come what may. On the other hand, they say George Weah is being supported by a lot of young people. And given that the elections took place right after the Christmas, that may have also contributed to the polls, many people not coming to vote. So it can cut both ways. Either the low turnout could benefit George Weah, or it could benefit Vice President Joseph Boakai.
We'll wait and see, but I think George Weah will be extremely disappointed given the very kind of hopeful statements he made. Thanks a lot, James.
Vincent, may I say that before you leave me? That is the worry of many people here, and that is because George Weah has already said to his supporters that he is going to win.
Yeah.
And he has been in the election process for 3 election cycles. So the worry is that what happens if George Weah does not win?
Yeah.
Can he control his supporters? That is the worry.
There's a danger there. We hope for the best. James Butty is the managing editor of VOA's Daybreak Africa radio program, reporting there live from Monrovia. Now, the number of migrants crossing the Mediterranean to Europe continued to fall last month, and the European Union says its policies to ease the crisis are working. But Amnesty International claims it blocks collaboration with Libyan groups involved in the detention of migrants, makes it complicit in gross human rights abuses. Henry Ridgwell reports from London.
In 2017, Europe claimed success in slowing the arrival of migrants. On the so-called Central Mediterranean route from North Africa, arrivals were down by a third. But Amnesty International says this has come at a terrible human cost.
Europe has decided to cooperate with Libyan authorities, knowing the kind of torture, abuses, detention that migrants and refugees are exposed to in Libya.
In November, video emerged apparently showing migrants being sold at a slave market in Libya, prompting international outrage.
Let me repeat my call to impose UN sanctions on human smugglers and traffickers.
European nations are providing tens of millions of dollars and training to the Libyan Coast Guard and armed groups under the control of the Tripoli Unity government to secure its sea border. That makes Europe complicit in the abuse, says Amnesty.
They are sent to detention centres, official detention centres, and then militias and other armed groups and Libyan officials control these centres. So this is a source of money for them. Migrants are extorted, they are forced to call their families, and their families are listening to the awful abuses they suffer. So they receive beatings, they are tortured, women are raped.
The EU has funded emergency repatriation flights to take migrants stranded in Libya back to their home countries. But there appears to be little political willingness to soften Europe's stance. EU leaders have trumpeted the falling migrant numbers as a way of countering anti-migrant populist forces.
The repercussions of the recent influx in 2016 and 2015 are still felt in most European countries. So until the EU decides and implements a new reform of its migration policies that is able to deliver sustainable solutions, the migrant crisis will still be an issue for European countries.
At the height of that influx in 2015, Germany took in over 1 million migrants. The backlash boosted support for the far right and cost Chancellor Angela Merkel votes during the September election. But supporters say her ultimate victory is proof that Germany and Europe can successfully integrate the migrants. Nevertheless, the EU appears determined to close down the routes across the Mediterranean. Despite the risk of torture, abuse and drowning, more than 160,000 migrants made the journey in 2017. Henry Ridgwell for VOA News, London.
Less than a year into his presidency, Donald Trump has reshuffled the list of priorities on who, among the country's refugees and documented immigrants and immigrant hopefuls, get to stay in the United States or enter in the first place. Now, few campaign promises have yet come to fruition, and not without strong opposition and legal challenges. But for the many affected, 2017's decision and reversals have led to a year of personal upheaval. VOA's Ramon Taylor has more.
A year of promises.
We have to establish borders and we have to build a wall.
And threats to decades-old U.S. policy.
The RAISE Act prevents new migrants and new immigrants from collecting welfare.
Under the premise of securing the country's borders and boosting the economy, have come as a blessing to President Trump's base and anathema to millions more. Among them, undocumented millennial workers brought to the U.S. as children, beneficiaries of temporary protected status, refugees, and travelers from several mostly Muslim countries. In diverse cities like New York, many spoke out.
This is about Trump consolidating power through fear. It has nothing to do with making us safe.
They're just in fear of us, and they should not be, because we are stronger all together.
But the hope of establishing a future in the U.S. has become more uncertain. After a year of court battles, Trump's travel order is for now in effect for travelers from 8 countries, 6 of them majority Muslim. Separately, his government cut the total number of refugees by more than half in 2017, even fewer in 2018. The next big push is family-based or chain immigration. Recent terror incidents in New York have emboldened the White House. Would-be terrorist Akayed Ullah prematurely detonated a pipe bomb near Times Square after coming to the U.S. from Bangladesh on an F-4 or family preference immigrant visa.
The president's policy has called for an end to chain migration, and if that had been in place, that would have prevented this individual from coming to the United States.
Family-based immigration policy, in existence since 1965, would be replaced with a merit-based approach that would cut legal immigration in half. Trump has also promised to get tough on illegal immigration, but the U.S. Immigration Agency removed some 14,000 fewer people than in 2016. Still, the number of immigration arrests increased, and immigration enforcement is staffing up. Meanwhile, beneficiaries of temporary protected status from Haiti, Sudan, and Nicaragua are set to become illegal in coming months after their TPS benefits were ended. In September, Trump ended the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA program, for almost 800,000 young people brought to the country illegally as kids. Congress will have to decide their fate before March 2018. Many are terrified, while others have found a platform to push back.
For me, as a lawyer, I'm going to defend my community in court, in the law, but also I'm going to defend my community here in the streets, and we're going to elevate our voices.
Sanctuary jurisdictions like New York have limited their cooperation with federal immigration authorities because they say they need their resources to fight local crime and not tear communities apart. But the Trump administration has pushed back on that logic.
There's this falsehood that's being pushed out there that sanctuary cities protect immigrant communities. No, they put immigrant communities at risk of more arrests because they're forcing their hand to go into neighborhoods.
In November, a judge blocked threats to strip federal funding from sanctuary jurisdictions, calling them a violation of the Constitution. But as with the travel ban, the court fight isn't over. And Trump's signature promise to build a big, beautiful wall along 1,600 kilometers on the southern border has been reduced to a down payment of 119 kilometers in 2018. Ramon Taylor, VOA News, New York.
President Trump and the Republican-controlled Congress began the year with ambitious plans to remake major pieces of the nation's broken immigration system. One of the president's most high-profile campaign promises was to build a wall along the United States southern border with Mexico. VOA's congressional correspondent Catherine Gibson looks back at challenges the president faced on Capitol Hill, building the wall and carrying out other key pledges.
Bringing change to the border.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
That was the president's year-opening promise to Congress.
We will soon begin the construction of a great wall.
House Republicans voted not once, but twice to spend $1.6 billion to begin construction and mend existing sections of fencing while hiring more Border Patrol and immigration enforcement agents. But battles over health care and tax bills consumed Capitol Hill, and a narrow Republican lead in the Senate gave Democrats some clout.
I made it so clear to the president that there is not going to be a wall.
House Republicans passed 2 bills fulfilling key Trump campaign promises, strengthening penalties on undocumented immigrants who return to the U.S. after being deported, and cutting federal funds to so-called sanctuary cities.
President Trump is cracking down on immigration crime, illegal border crossings are down, and arrests and deportations of criminal aliens are up, just as Americans demanded last November.
But undocumented immigrants rely on the protections of those sanctuary cities, House Democrats argued.
It is a safety net for people that are part of our family. They take care of our children, they wash our dishes, they take care of our elderly, they pick our crops. And so this is an anti-American bill.
And said the other bill discriminated against otherwise law-abiding undocumented immigrants.
Guess what this bill does? It says send them to jail for 20 years for trying to come back and raising their children.
The Senate has yet to vote on either bill. The latter half of the year was dominated by Trump's directive to legally resolve DACA. An Obama administration-era program protecting more than 800,000 young people brought to the U.S. as children, and also known as Dreamers.
I have a love for these people, and hopefully now Congress will be able to help them and do it properly.
Well, Republicans said a so-called DACA fix didn't make sense on its own.
DACA is a symptom of a bigger problem, which is we do not have control of our borders. So while we deal with DACA, which is something that the President has asked us to deal with in Congress, we also had to deal with the problem in the first place, securing our borders, enforcing our laws, so that we don't have another DACA problem 10 years down the road.
Democrats said time was running out.
The President said, I'm going to do away with Obama's executive order, and now, Congress, you do something. And all I hear from many of my colleagues is, well, let's see tomorrow whether we can work this into the schedule. Or maybe next month, or maybe the month after.
Their threat to shut down the government to secure Dreamers' status never materialized, pushing a decision into 2018 to close a year of inaction. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Capitol Hill.
What I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Now coming up, economists see risks in 2018 despite America's economic momentum. Stay with us.
This is BizBeat.
The beauty of avocados can be found on the dining tables at the Avocado Show restaurant in Amsterdam, considered the first all-avocado restaurant in Europe.
The idea came from Instagram.
Manager Jay Greenslade says the popularity of the Instagram profiles based on avocados inspired the restaurant idea.
You kind of eat it with your eyes before you even taste it.
Customer Siglin Van Roon.
And it's just like art when it's come to the dishes.
Avocado creation sprinkled with sesame seeds, edible flowers, green leaf salad, sushi, raw salmon, caviar, an avocado bread hamburger filled with smoked sausage. Greenslade says they had some 36,000 Instagram followers prior to opening, and that's nearly tripled in months. And the Avocado Show already has 150 franchise requests. For VOA's BizBeat, I'm Philip Alexio.
Welcome back. Now, despite initial concerns about an untested new leader, the world's largest economy will end the year on a high note. The U.S. economy is expanding at the fastest pace in more than 2 years, buoyed in part by low unemployment, soaring stock prices, and a broad economic recovery around the globe. The momentum is expected to carry into 2018. But as Mila Sega reports, economists say the new year is likely to bring new challenges.
10 years since the start of the financial crisis, and with a controversial president at the helm, the U.S. economy is doing better than many economists expected.
That was a surprise. We saw continued hiring,
corporate profits rebounded nicely. We saw some growth there. That powered the stock market higher. And I think the other big surprise was just the almost complete lack of volatility in the stock market.
Now, armed with his first major legislative victory on tax cuts, President Donald Trump says the future has never looked brighter.
Americans are filled with excitement for the future, optimism like they haven't seen. You've seen all the charts, and enthusiasm for the incredible possibilities that lie ahead for our country.
A recent survey by the National Association for Business Economics suggests the president's optimism is shared by the business community.
They've gotten much more optimistic. In the September survey, most of them said that the risks were greater on the downward side. Now, more than 60% say that the risk is positive.
And yet, the risk of an unforeseen event is never far.
We see what's happening with North Korea, for example, geopolitical risks. There's always a risk of some sort of disruption in financial markets, probably more likely to start overseas, but could start domestically, as we saw back in the 2007-8-9 episode.
The new year also brings a change in leadership at the U.S. Federal Reserve at a time of rising interest rates, massive balance sheets, and very low inflation. Others note that 2018 also happens to be an election year.
Of course, politics here in Washington, D.C. also very important because we know that this is an important time not only for the U.S. government with midterm elections coming up. It won't be long before we actually start thinking about the 2020 presidential election.
The global economy, which grew about 4% in 2017, is expected to be a stabilizing force in the new year. But economists say they're monitoring Europe for any potential economic shocks, along with the oil-rich Middle East, where U.S. policy could cause tensions to flare. Millar Sega for VOA News, Washington.
Well, in this digital age, meals are now shared over the internet, with social media users looking for dishes that are both ready to snap and to eat. Restaurateurs across the globe are taking advantage, styling their creations to be camera ready. Viewers Jesusam and Oni has more.
Snapshots of food continue to dominate social media, and restaurants around the world are taking notice.
I think it's been a game changer. Social media, the internet, means that people can go online, see stuff that inspires them. I mean, literally, it's all out there. Not only what you can do, but how to do it. It's all online.
While dine-in has always been a social event, now it has also become a social media event. Chefs and businesses looking to cash in are creating unique dishes that consumers can share online, like Bangkok's latest hipster zone, creating quite a buzz with dishes that feature bugs. One cafe in Amsterdam devoted a photogenic menu to the avocado.
The idea came from Instagram. It's two Dutch guys saw the opportunity through various Instagram profiles that are based on avocados and food styling. The popularity is incredible, so they just figured if we can make a restaurant that serves food that looks as good as this and also tastes amazing, it's got to be sure to succeed.
Green Slate says they had around 36,000 followers on Instagram before the restaurant even opened in March. The trend is also inspiring artists. In Ukraine, a Donald Trump portrait made out of dill. In London, tasty recreations of famous paintings made entirely out of chocolate.
As a material, it works like paint, for example, but then paint, it doesn't snap, it doesn't break off. It's not, an issue if there's too much heat or cold or damp.
And speaking of chocolate, this factory in Belgium uses 3D printers to make edible mini sculptures.
3D de chocolat, c'est un nouvel outil.
3D chocolate printing is a new tool available to chocolate and pastry makers to create new forms, new things to better express their creativity.
Creativity that they hope will bring in the dough. After all, in this digital age, a meal is only as good as it looks online. Jesus Oni, VOA News, Washington.
Now I feel hungry. Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, how human monitors are helping preserve the African penguin. We'll be right back.
In
Liberia, vote counting underway in presidential election where experts anticipated a close result and citizens hope for the country's first peaceful and democratic power transfer in more than 70 years. New Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa has appointed the country's former military commander Constantino Chiwenga as one of his 2 vice presidents. In Senegal, the trial of 31 people accused of terrorism offenses was postponed on Wednesday. In Morocco, thousands protest for a 3rd day against economic conditions after 2 men died while digging in an abandoned coal mine. And Russia has lost contact with Angosat-1, the first national telecoms satellite for Angola.
Welcome back to Africa 54, and here's what's trending. Iceland's tourism industry is coming up with new and exciting ways to attract thrill seekers to the vast and remote volcanic island on the Arctic Circle. One of the latest is see-through bubble pods nestled in woodland for a unique view of the snowy landscape and northern lights. The bubble pods are located within easy reach of some of the main attractions within Iceland's Golden Triangle, including the famous geyser with its frequent eruptions. The pods are not cheap. A one-night stay will see you back around $250. The full Golden Circle tour with a night in a bubble will cost you just under $600. Well, next up, a Cape Town restaurant is celebrating becoming one of the top 10 fine dining restaurants on the review website TripAdvisor. La Colombe prides itself on its experimental creative cuisine and even takes guests on a trip into an enchanted forest as part of their tasting menu. La Colombe has recently taken 7th place on the list of best fine dining restaurants worldwide on TripAdvisor. It's the only African restaurant in the top 10. If you'd like to experience the unique meal, you'll have to plan ahead. There is a 2 to 3 month waiting list in the summer months. Now, staying in Cape Town, conservationists in South Africa are stepping up efforts to save the African penguin. Humans love penguins, but the penguins do not necessarily feel the same way. Some try to make an escape from the crowds, often winding up in trouble, like falling down drains. Now 5 monitors patrol this Simmons Town area close to the colony looking for lost or injured penguins. The lucky ones are brought straight back to the beach. Injured penguins and abandoned chicks are taken to a special rehab center, over 700 in 2017 alone. And that's what's trending today. And that's our show. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a good day.
Welcome to English in a Minute. Most people enjoy listening to music. But is this expression actually about songs and tunes?
Music to my ears.
Jonathan, I cannot believe we have to work over the weekend.
Did you not hear the news? The meeting for the project got canceled. No work this weekend after all.
Awesome! That is music to